Analysis Lessons and Consequences Thereof by ElaneTheTired. Chapter 3. Summary. Nezu and Aizawa come to some conclusions. Nezu acquires a new favorite human. Notes. Hi guys, this chapter is early because I was really eager to post it and I have no self-control. I also updated the tags to let you know a bit more what to expect. There is a lot more in store. As always, your comments give me life and motivation, so thanks for all the support. Enjoy. As always, Nezu timed his actions so the door would open just as Aizawa raised his fist to knock on it. He had originally started doing so because he enjoyed people's spooked expressions when faced with a taste of his so-called omniscience. It was sad, really, how few people realized how much one could do with well-placed cameras and some basic logic. Aizawa has long since stopped reacting to Nezu's little trick, of course, but by now it was a well-established tradition, and besides, the principal was in the habit of indulging his own little quirks. Nezu examined Aizawa as he entered the office, routinely marking the smallest details and neatly cataloging them in the vast caverns of his brain. As always, exhausted and disheveled, his shoulders are slumped just a little more than usual, steps just a bit too stiff. He's anxious about something, then, strange considering the fact Midoriya seems quite happy after their meeting, black notebook in his hand, probably Midoriya's. The words on the cover are written in a neat hand, but I recall Ishiyama-kun saying something about the boy having a messy handwriting. Interesting discrepancy, number 15. Oh, this is going to be fun. Nezu waved cheerily at the tired teacher, gesturing for him to sit down and already busying himself with preparing tea. Chamomile, to soothe Aizawa's frayed nerves, and maybe Nezu's as well. Being the principal of UA High was far from easy in these turbulent times, after all, and depending on the outcome of this meeting, he might find a new heap of problems on his proverbial hands. Or maybe a new student. His calculation said that the latter was more likely, though, which made his tail swish in excitement. He didn't even bother to hide the movement, enjoying the way it made Aizawa back away from him just the tiniest bit. Objectively, Nezu knew that tormenting his employees, however mild and petty his ways of doing so were, was a bad habit. He had learned a long time ago, however, that the humans who acted solely in objectively beneficial ways were very few and far between, and as such he permitted himself a certain degree of freedom as well, for the sole purpose of better blending in with society, of course. It was a well-known fact among the faculty of UA, as well as several other circles, that Nezu had a bit of a grudge against humanity as a whole, and for very good reasons. It was less well known that the grudge in and of itself wasn't the only, or even primary reason for the existence of his famed streak of sadism. No, the truth of the matter was that a lot of what Nezu permitted himself to indulge in was to reassure himself. It gave him comfort, knowing that he held power over others in his small paws, enough power to hurt them more than they could ever hurt him. Not that he would, of course. Heroism and education were his fields of choice for a reason, and he strove to protect and better humanity to the best of his ability. And yet, just in case. He had let his thoughts stray again, and the tea was ready. A small twitch of the ears to clear his head, the ever-cheerful smile having never left his snout, and he sat down on the sofa opposite Aizawa's, daintily sipping from his fine china cup. Aizawa, still slumped silently in his seat, took the offered opportunity for a moment of peace and took a sip as well, voicing his appreciation with a small grunt. He was a notorious lover of coffee, but long years of work under the small principal had taught him the value of a well-brewed cup of tea, as well. So, Aizawa-kun, Nezu finally broke the silence. How was your meeting with young Midoriya? Informative, I hope? Of course you know about it, grumbled the tired teacher, not surprised in the least, if a little irritated. He was well aware of the vast network of cameras the principal had situated around the school, both for security purposes and for his own personal information hoarding habits. Several places in the school were camera-free, like bathrooms and the teacher's personal offices, because Nezu had a healthy, if begrudging, respect for people's privacy. But most other places, like classrooms and hallways, and even teacher's lounge, were under constant surveillance. As such, there were very few interesting things that happened in the school without Nezu's knowledge. It was tragic, really, that young Midoriya's apparent talent was one of them. Nezu hummed in affirmation and took another sip of tea, waiting patiently for the tired teacher to gather his thoughts and answer his question. Aizawa lowered his head just a little more, burying his face deeper in his scarf and concealing his mouth from view in a manner Nezu knew brought him comfort, then started speaking. I will assume you know why I initiated the meeting with the kid then, as well. The essay he submitted on my first analysis assignment. I'm a fairly good strategist and an adequate analysis teacher, but I don't believe I am equipped to deal with Midoriya's particular brand of genius. This thing is right up your alley. With that, he produced a stack of paper from an inner pocket. Surprisingly undamaged for having been stored in such a seemingly careless manner. Aizawa rarely did anything carelessly. A fleeting glance was enough for Nezu to know that this was the same stack of papers his two employees were freaking out over earlier in the teacher's lounge. From what the kid told me, it appears that analyzing quirks and heroes specifically is a long-standing hobby of his since early childhood. He has a series of notebooks full of his work. This is the latest one. He placed the item on top of the essay carefully, almost as if it would break if he applied too much force. Or maybe bite him. I've seen him writing in it several times throughout the year, but never really thought to ask what it was exactly he was writing. It is a big oversight on my part. The man bowed his head. Nezu decided that this was prime time to interrupt. Don't take it too hard, Aizawa-kun. The fault isn't entirely yours. If anything, I feel more responsible for this oversight than you, seeing as I have also taken notice of some of Midoriya's strange habits, but never investigated further. Nezu shook his head regretfully, letting his smile diminish just a bit. Aizawa grunted dubiously, but his shoulders lowered slightly, an almost imperceptible tension leaving them. Good. Nezu knew well of the man's tendency to feel responsible for everything when it came to his students, even things out of his control, and while it was a useful and admirable trait in a teacher, it could sometimes become unhealthy. I also suspect, Nezu continued in a contemplative tone, that our lack of attention to detail isn't the only factor in this incident. On further consideration of young Midoriya's actions, it almost seems that he was hiding this from us on purpose, quite adeptly too, like he has practice. That is actually the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, said Aizawa promptly, blank expression morphing into a slight frown. When I broached the topic of the meeting, the problem child was extraordinarily quick to assume that he was there to be scolded specifically for his work being creepy. When I asked for clarification, he said that that was how others typically regarded his analysis. Damn near burst into tears when I told him it was fine. The man shook his head in consternation, frown deepening. I knew he has low self-esteem. I knew he doesn't trust the teachers enough to confide in us, but this conversation made me realize the problem might be much more serious than we thought. There are a lot of issues there, and the kid is very good at hiding them too, which is even more concerning. Silence hung in the office as Nezu digested this new information. Before he could answer, though, Aizawa continued, voicing the thought that worried him most in a low, gravelly voice. There are a lot of strange things about Midoriya, most of which I can't explain with the knowledge I currently have of his past. And you know as well as I do that kids don't just become like this of their own volition. This is the result of systemic conditioning. Nezu finished the thought for him, bristling with building anger, like the sun slowly but inexorably rising above the horizon to unleash its scorching wrath upon a desert land. The pieces of the puzzle that was Izuku Midoriya suddenly fell into place with a resounding click. Nezu knew that Midoriya had been quirkless until just shortly before UA. Midoriya, who, like most quirkless children these days, must have been treated like the scum of the earth at best and a bug underfoot at worst, by children and adults alike. Midoriya, who didn't trust adults to do their job or help him if he asked, who was so quick to take matters into his own hands when it mattered because he believed no one else would. Midoriya, who according to statistics would have been suicide-baited an average of 7.4 times a month. Midoriya, who did what he thought was right, no matter the cost to himself. The facts kept coming, appearing out of the dark depths of the principal's memory and clicking neatly together into one long logical chain that seemed to constrict around Nezu's throat. Midoriya was as socially awkward as he was friendly. Midoriya never hurt a fly when it wasn't life or death situation. Midoriya had comments in his records pegging him as a troublemaker who often started fights with his fellow students. Midoriya was an exemplary student, quiet but attentive and ready to participate in class, with grades near the top of his class. Midoriya had slightly higher than average grades in middle school, which sometimes took suspicious dips. Midoriya was known to flinch at unexpected shouting and loud noises, specifically explosions. Midoriya went to the same school as Bakugo. Nezu felt his customary smile changing, warping into an animalistic baring of teeth. He had known all of this. He had had all the facts neatly stacked in the back of his mind, just waiting until he paid close enough attention for them to show him the full picture. He knew what conditioning, abuse, that was the word all the facts were spelling so clearly, could do to a young mind. Years and years of the same harsh words repeated to you until they were branded into your brain. Focus, this isn't about you. He had been inexcusably negligent. There wasn't much he could do to atone for this mistake, aside from ensuring things were taken care of in the best possible way moving forward. The only problem was that he didn't trust himself to handle this alone. Not right now, when the anger was still teeming inside of him like lava, searing hot and dangerous. Maybe not even later, when it would have had time to cool off and solidify into a sharp obsidian edge. Fortunately, he didn't have to. He saw the exact moment Aizawa arrived at the same conclusions he did, several seconds in delay. Well, not the same conclusions. After all, the teacher was both missing important facts and quite a bit less adept at building logical change than the principal, but close enough. The teacher's dark eyes narrowed, staring from between messy locks of hair with an intensity rarely seen outside of battle, almost glowing red. Nezu forcefully suppressed a full-body flinch, but Aizawa noticed anyway and averted his eyes, breaking the tension. Both were silent for a moment longer, and then Aizawa spoke, voice cold and decisive. I want to investigate all their middle school. Look at camera footage, talk to teachers, maybe even students. Something is definitely wrong here, and I'm going to find out what. Nezu mentally shook off his momentary discomfort and smiled instead. It wasn't an expression native to his species, but he had taken the time to refine and perfect it, and was quite proud of it. It was thin and razor-sharp, with just the right tilt of his mouth and a hint of needle-like canines glinting in the darkness. He knew well it made most people think of large predators stalking the night and poisonous snakes, slithering unseen in the grass. Excellent, Aizawa-kun. I will arrange a meeting with the principal of Aldera. Don't hesitate to involve me if you require any assistance in the legal department. Nezu wouldn't give his employee the facts he was missing. It wasn't his place, but he didn't need to. Aizawa nodded shortly, failing to quite suppress his own shiver of unease. I will also take care of our little analysis problem. If young Midoriya is as good as you say, and have little reason to doubt your judgment, I will gladly tutor him myself. Now, if there isn't anything else you wish to discuss, I dare not take any more of your precious time. There are plenty of things both of us need to attend to, Nezu said, one paw already reaching for the small black notebook resting on his table. Never one to dally, Aizawa bowed his head respectfully to the principal, rose to his feet and left, steps just as silent and determined as when he had arrived. Perhaps even more so, now bolstered by new righteous anger. Only when the door clicked shut and the cameras showed Aizawa disappearing behind the corner did Nezu finally allow himself to relax. Tension bleeding out of his small form, smile dissipating into an expression that was less human, more natural and comfortable for his features. He allowed himself a moment just to breathe, feeling the air circulate through his lungs, the pleasant smell of tea still lingering in the air, the last rays of sunlight shining through the large windows and painting the vast, ornate office in picturesque shades of twilight. There was no danger, no one there to threaten or distract him, just Nezu alone with his thoughts and schemes, just the way he liked it. He liked it, he did. And before he attended to his mundane, grueling duties, he had a rare treat. The work of another great mind, may be worthy of his personal tutelage. Nezu gently picked up the black notebook and opened it to the first page. The title at the head of the page indicated it was an analysis of a less well-known hero allegedly retired, and Midoriya's erstwhile mentor, Gran Torino. Even at first glance, which was enough for Nezu's ever-racing mind to dissect the most important details, it was a masterpiece, unorganized yet surprisingly tidy, a stream of consciousness consisting of observations and questions, extrapolating notes for further research. It was keen and inquisitive, observant and original, yet logical and based firmly on facts and science. It was raw and unrefined, and permeated with glee and enthusiasm for the subject that resonated with something deep within the mammalian principle. And as he kept reading, Nezu smiled. The smile was wide, animalistic, full of sharp teeth. It was a smile he would never show when in public, in human company. It was the most genuine smile to grace Nezu's face in a long, long time. Endnotes. On an unrelated note, I'm still debating Bakugo's future, and I would appreciate your input. Options. 1. Eat him to Gen Ed. 2. Swap him with someone from 1B, with the appropriate punishments and therapy as a side dish. 3. Leave him in 1A, again with heavy sanctions. Or any other good ideas y'all have. See you next week.